So we're going to get started today. So we had you have our names, you know who we work for, but we're going to cover just real briefly kind of what we cover in our roles. So I'm Stephanie Franklin Thomas. I am the Senior Vice President and CISO over at ABM Industries. And so if you don't know who ABM Industries is we're probably the largest company that you don't even really know exists. We manage a lot of janitorial services, parking services. So if you've been in an airport, an education institution, even your office building, we may be cleaning it. So we're about 140,000 people. So it is quite large. So I'm going to pass it to my friend over here, Matt, to do his introduction.
Hi, so my name is Matt Lemon. I'm the CISO for Huawei. And what Huawei does, apart from making phones, cell phones, and cellular equipment, we're also involved in IoT stuff, autonomous vehicles, and yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Rahul Bhardwaj. I head Global Data Security and Privacy at Kroll. It's a mid-sized firm, about 7,000 professionals worldwide. We do a lot of cybersecurity incident response services. We are leader in incident response across the globe. So some interesting stories if you want to hear, meet me after the session. And then we own a couple of other brands like Duff & Phelps, which is a market leader in valuation services. And similarly, across the pond in UK, we own brands like Lucids and RedScan into similar services. My role at Kroll is basically revolving around putting new programs and initiative to secure Kroll and its customer data we own as part of our services.
Hi, my name is Mahasa. I work at Northrop Grumman. For our cybersecurity requirements for the Department of Defense, we have a variety of issues that we deal with, not hardening the environment, but the type of data feed that we provide to ourselves and to the external bodies. We have multiple classification levels. We have very good ethics as it relates to development, and so we are very deeply invested in cyber intelligence, and artificial intelligence intelligent environment for us.
So you can see we have quite a STEAM panel with a lot of practical application experience. So we're going to cover off some questions. Of course, at the end, hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for some Q&A. So I'll start off with Rahul. Okay. As the world becomes more digital and cyber crimes become more frequent, then the critical nature of cybersecurity is increasing, commanding worldwide attention. How does this change the role of cybersecurity executive?
I think the role of CISO have changed a lot, especially since COVID had hit and all the new regulation, putting a lot of owners back on the board. As a CISO, I can't complain all the dramatic hearing Congress had of Equifax and other large enterprise board members once they got popped and hacked. CISOs are now being looked upon as a true value partner. I can tell you numerous times where the product owners, the service owner, even when they're conceptualizing or designing a new product feature or a new region to introduce their services, CISOs are now being called upon as the very first folks. Do we have regulations we should be worried about? What are the cybersecurity requirements we should look upon even from the inception? So as a CISO, I think with all the cybercrime hitting the headlines, this is the best time to be in the business. You are being valued. Your opinion means a lot to the business. And all the hard work you and your team are putting are getting the recognition at the highest level. So being a purely technology-driven CISO who was sitting behind and trying to code the firewalls and the IDS, IPS, CISOs are now looked upon as a true business value enabler who are critical to the bottom line.
I would agree with everything that you stated. I think, CISOs used to fall in two camps. Either they were highly technical and had a little business knowledge, or they knew the business and they weren't very technical. And now you kind of have to have that balance to truly be successful. You can't go to the board and talk to them in firewalls and networks, because you will get blank stares. So you definitely have to change the way that you present the security risk that's out there nowadays.
I would agree. I mean, I'm originally from a very technical background, but now all I need really is enough technical expertise to be able to know that I need to hire the right smart people and leave them to get on to do their jobs. And that my role is more of a kind of people management and being able to explain the risks to the rest of the C-suite, and to try and get security involved in the discussions with product owners and with legal and so on as early as possible, so that we're no longer seen as kind of the security police that we were, years ago, but more of a business enabler, because we're not saying to people, no, you can't do X or you can't do Y, but we're going to them and say, well, if you want to do that, then you also need to do this, and that's because cyber has a big focus on it at the moment. Well, for the last few years, certainly, as Rahul said, since before COVID, or since COVID, and I think it's good for us because we're getting involved in the right conversations at the right level, and people are taking us more seriously rather than just people that like to go around and scare and the rest of the business.
Absolutely.
Break it, as I call our team.
Yeah.
Mahasa. We'll move on to question 2, and we'll start with you. AI is often met with some skepticism from cybersecurity professionals, yet it also seems that the only way to manage cybersecurity threats in today's world. What do you view as the ideal role of AI within cybersecurity as we move forward?
The role is to really provide the intelligence and the automation of the discipline of artificial intelligence into. Unfortunately, we have cyber experts and we have AI experts, and there's missing between the two camps. The cyber team says, well, that's used only in this specific area, and it can't be used in this area. And so you have to prove those points and be an advocate for it, to be able to deliver AI and understand both sides of the equation. That's the only way you can really push the product forward with an AI discipline underneath it.
If I have to agree with Mahasa, I believe AI is a necessary evil within cybersecurity. With the attack surface increasing so much, there is not enough bodies available to throw at this problem. But at the same time, as a CISO to adopt an AI-based product or an AI model, I think one thing which is cornerstone to all this is the trust. As a CISO, I need to trust the product and the model which is being offered because of all the regulations. Well, take GDPR, it warrants us to define if we are using an AI or a machine learning algorithm, we need to prove that it does not has inbuilt bias and it works exactly as it said so. So it's a necessary evil. We have to work. We need it to combat adversaries. But at the same time, I think it's a problem that Mahasa said, like we have to work with the AI experts, the product owner, the service owner, to make sure that the trust and confidence within these product and services are to a level where we can go ahead and inherit them.
I think Rahul mentioned something which is very good at the moment. I mean, we're facing a huge shortage of skilled cybersecurity people, and there's also the trust thing. So, my as a manager, what I do is as I said before, I hire smart people and then I let them get on with their job and I trust them.
That's a great question. One of the things that I really push
not
is
to trust them.
what's the escalation path? So we can do so many things.
And it's also the same with
tier one, where it's a
with AI
or
or
getting to
machine
the
learning.
FAQ or
You know,
whatever.
it needs to
But
be
now I'm
demonstrated
asking a
to
question about my
people
policy or something like that.
to
Maybe
CISOs
I've
and
got
to security
some sort of
leaders that
conversational
they can
AI
trust
that
what
can
is
go
what,
back,
what
reach into those
the
systems and start
systems are
healing
doing.
it.
I
But
think
now
from
I have
my
a
own
question
perspective, at the
specific
moment we're kind of
filing a
using it
claim
more
or
as
something that
a decision
is just
support
outside
system.
the bounds
So
of what this
the AI
agent
systems
can
go
handle.
off and they
And
analyze
what I've
stuff, they
coached
come
my
back with
stakeholders on is
recommendations, and then that goes to a human that can look at what the recommendation is and say, okay, well, that looks like it makes sense. That's what we'll do, or no, that's complete rubbish. We'll ignore that.
Yeah.
goes through such that you don't have
So this is the trust factor we were talking in the machines, right? So that's validates our point. That was intentionally done. Go ahead, Matt.
No, we can't trust the microphones. So I don't know how much you heard, but what I said was we're facing a shortage of security people. So we do need to move with AI and machine learning. There is a trust issue, and what I've always tried to do is to hire smart people, let them do their jobs, and to trust them to do that job unless they give me a reason not to. And it's the same with artificial intelligence, with machine learning. Those systems really need to prove themselves to people at security leaders levels, so that we can get a level of confidence in what they are doing before we let them loose on with our crown jewels. And what we are doing, and what I think a lot of people are doing, is using them more as decision support systems. So you're not, to the previous presenter's point, there's a kind of model where you would let the AI run and see what it's doing. The next level of maturity is that you let it run and make recommendations, and then there's the ultimate model where you just let it run and it takes care of stuff. We're nowhere near that yet, I don't think. So we're using it as more of a decision support. So it makes recommendations when it sees anomalous behavior or strange stuff, and it puts that in front of a human and lets them make the ultimate decision as to whether what it's suggesting is right or whether it's rubbish.
So just to capture, or really to add to something that I'm hearing is, yes, there is a shortage of cybersecurity professionals. In a prior life, at a prior role that I was in, the CISO organization actually existed where we had the governance separated from the SOC. So I had responsibility for everything except for the SOC.
spot on.
The SOC
So I'm sure we've all got a ton of revealing
Had
stories, but if you
350
could share a revealing story
That's
about
a
AI
lot
and
of
customer
security
service, whether it's a use
to be in a
case,
SOC. But the
challenging
reason for that
experience,
was
or
we
even
weren't
something
using a lot
from
of
a colleague,
AI.
what would it be?
I hear it, and I'm like, it almost is like the voice of a god or something. I don't know, but maybe all that security talk is going in there as well. Who knows? So I think he's working on fixing it. But to say that, we had a lot of people that were working in the SOC because we didn't have a level of we weren't using any AI, but we got a third party that really used AI. And the thought process, kind of similar to what we saw on the screen, was we were going to watch it, let it learn, because it does need to learn. You can't just, set it and forget it. I think that was an infomercial at some point, but you can't do that. You put it in, it learns your environment, and then you move forward. So a year after implementing with a third party that had AI, we were still not trusting enough to redeploy those resources into different things. So there's, AI is interesting. I think and I think there's another question that we're probably going to touch on this a little bit. It's something that I think we're all saying that we need, but it's very tough for security folks to kind of let go and rely solely on it. So I'm going to move to the next question. We'll start with you, Matt, on this one. I believe, yep. How are you currently using AI for cybersecurity? Or if you can't share, where do you see the major impact?
So we use AI in a few different areas. So the security team that I have is around 7,000 people. The SOC, to your point, I'm also responsible for the SOC. And the SOC uses AI and quite a few machine learning models to be able to reduce the number of people that are having to do things like threat hunting and threat analysis. So that's one area, and that's been really helpful in being able to repurpose some of those guys and girls from the SOC to do higher value work. Another area that we use it is in fraud prevention. So one of the things that we do is we have an app store for all our phones, like the Google Play and Apple. And we get a lot of fraud or attempted fraud within that Play Store. And there are things, simulators and click farms that are going off and clicking on making reviews for apps and entering competitions and things like that. So we're using artificial intelligence to try and figure out whether these devices are from a click farm, whether they're a simulator, that's also quite useful and it is yielding good results. The third way we're using it is actually on the devices themselves. So the devices that we have AI built into them, and if you download an application outside of the App Store, I should say, what it does is it sandboxes that app, it runs it, it looks at the connections that it's trying to make, what it's trying to talk to, what it's trying to call, and then we'll give the user a kind of confidence score in percentage-wise, so that they can then decide whether they want to, if it's a score of 60, they probably don't want to install it. If it's a score of 90, then they're probably okay with that. I think that's kind of about it.
Rahul?
We are using AI within our cybersecurity framework at multiple programs and facets. I think we rely heavily on Gartner and Capgemini report, which basically divides use of AI and machine learning within cyberspace into 4 quadrants: easy to deploy, high yield versus real complex problem, which require a lot of pre-validation. And some of our models and the usage of AI has been on that spectrum. We went for early adopters, which were easy to deploy, got ton of our resources free, post-validation, and then use those resources to then start working on the larger problems. Some of the problems are similar to what Matt said: early detection of anomalies, flagging it off to the second tier so that they can look closely upon them, putting a fidelity score on our contractors, depending upon what you are using. If there is an abnormal behavior picked up by one of our AI models, your fidelity score will go down and up, and we won't let people go ahead and touch our crown jewels if your fidelity rate doesn't meet certain threshold. One of the complex problem we have recently put AI, and I'm going to speak about that tomorrow also in my whole talk, is identifying our crown jewels. We went ahead, scanned through our data, looked at what it has, and then push it through an AI engine where it goes and track through different regulations around the world. And we put a risk score on that data. If something has to go down with this data, I'm actually looking at these 5 regulatory violations. Some of them can be a killer for my firm. So that pops up on the top in our enterprise risk management heat map. So those are some of the complex problems where humanly it was impossible for us to go and dig through these regulations and identifying what really impacts me on different data sets. So it's across the spectrum, depending upon. One thing I will agree to, Mahasa, To add fidelity to this model, one thing which we have uniquely, we have a bunch of data scientists working for CISO's office. We do multiple validation before we actually approve an AI model to run autonomously within our framework.
Mahasa.
CSAT tank. Or you can set.
What was the question?
Oh, so we're still in the question around how are you using in your role? How are you using AI?
I use it for zero-day detection because it's very behavior-based type of a detection that I can readily access and understand it. We look for insider threat and external threat, but insider threats are most vulnerable place for Department of Defense because, as you know, in Department of Defense, we're in caves, right? We're not Google, we're not all out there, so we have a lot of internal issues that we need to address. And those behaviors of our resources are the things that we like to monitor using AI.
Thank you. So, I'm going to chime in on one area that we're starting to use it at ABM. We have third parties that use it, but there's been this initiative in the last year, with COVID and budgets are getting tighter and things like that. So started this initiative about a year ago to really look at self-funding. So, we have this great big Microsoft license and it has a bunch of security stuff in it. So what we decided to do was deploy more of that and then get more AI third parties to help us in certain areas. So we did that with email security, which, I'll tell you, we were paying like $1.8 million on a contract through a third party to help us with the security around email. But we decided to go more native with Microsoft, and we were able to reduce the cost of the entire contract by like $1 million, right? And we still got a certain level of protection because now we're taking a more focused approach and learning the things that we want to let in our environment, the things we don't want to come in. So we're the whole idea was get the same level of protection or increase that level of protection, but save some money in the process, not give the money back because I needed it for something else. So that was the plan. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next question. And so let's see here. Mahasa. Okay, what challenges or barriers to adoption do you observe with AI in cybersecurity?
I believe the cybersecurity environment, they're not logisticians, right? And AI is a very logistical type of an approach. So what I like to do, as I explained, the design, I really focus on building the lowest level of state diagrams for them so that they can understand what AI is going to do and be able to put. What I like to do is put the cybersecurity engineer inside the code, if that makes sense. The tasking and the responsibility and the knowledge that he brings to the table and what he delivers, we can logistically explain that and build those intelligence with our agent so it can deliver to the same level of expertise that if you had a cybersecurity person in there. I think that explanation is always missing because we don't want to go too deep and lose our audience in that process. So that's what I think is the gap that we deal with every day.
Okay. Others?
I think one of the challenges is that we don't get too excited about AI too quickly. One of the things that we're doing is using AI systems for lots of different things, but only allowing it to actually make decisions and perform the work where we've decided that the risk of it making the wrong decision is acceptable and that we can roll back that decision or fix whatever it's done quickly. So we're working with it on a risk-based approach. It would be really easy to roll things out much more quickly. But it goes back to the point that we were talking about before, that with a lack of trust, or until we've built up a proper level of trust, that we don't get too carried away and start to roll out AI and machine learning across areas that we're not really comfortable with.
I'll add to what two of my esteemed panelists have said is that is the number of legislation and regulation we have to hope through just to implement one of the model. The other barriers is the sheer quality of data. If the data you are using to design any AI model is corrupt, built on bias, you will never get the end result what you are looking for. So you need to work with really good data science team, which is hard to find talent, just like cybersecurity is. This is another field where we all struggle. And then I believe adoption of AI, it's more executive driven. If you have a leader who is passionate and give value to adoption, because we will find these challenges of talent, data quality, the communication. Security is looking at moon, the data science team is talking Venus. You need to bridge that gap somehow. So those are the earlier barriers you need to come out. I think the easiest way to go about is have a very clear thought in terms of what is the end objective you're trying to define, keep it realistic, keep it practical, and then start looking at these underlying reasons what we just specified.
Hey, good comment, definitely on data scientists. For ABM, or just being a CISO in general, I think the biggest challenge is after spending years of drilling zero trust into the minds of everybody in the organization and the cybersecurity professionals, it's very hard for me to say, okay, but you can trust this, right? They don't get it, right? So, it's really changing that mindset is a real challenge. Okay, so we will move on to the next question, which is, what is the strategy? What is your strategy for actually implementing IA across your organization? And with that, I'll start off. Really, what I've found is, things in our environment need to happen in small increments, right? We've got to have smaller successes. And, I'll be honest with you, my CEO, my CFO, CIO, well, not the case for the CIO. She is very knowledgeable. But, when I talk to a lot of these executives about AI, they just want it to work. They don't necessarily care about the how. They just want it to work. They want to rely on the data, and they want to know that when they go to their computer, it's secure. So in implementing it, I have to do it in small incremental doses so that their life doesn't change. Everything stays the same for them, but I know that we are actually doing more from a security posture standpoint on my side. So it's really balancing it. I don't see us moving quickly in any direction. I think that's just the nature of our business. I have been in other companies that were more like the Wild Wild West, and you could move things along a lot quicker. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's not. But I think for us, it's definitely slow and steady and capturing those wins before we move forward. So Matt?
Yeah, so we're quite a risk-averse company as well, and our strategy really is to look for the quick wins, so that we can demonstrate that AI is useful, that it can actually free up people to do other jobs or other high-value parts of their role, and as all of us have said at some point, to help build the trust in those systems. So it's being rolled out slowly. I'm lucky in that my boss, the CEO, is supportive of this kind of technology, and that, broadly speaking, we so far have done quite well with what we have rolled out. Back to the SOC, that helps us to speed up our time to respond to things and to remediate stuff. But similar to your own, we look for small things that we can roll out slowly and look for the success there.
I'll agree to you. both of you. I think it's just moving the needle in the right direction. You are not going to build Rome in a single day, especially with AI. Go study, make sure you are checking all the boxes. I think the strategy which worked really well for us at Kroll, because I had the innovation office within CISO group, is that building those alliances and partnership. I have a monthly meeting with our privacy office and compliance office. We don't roll out any AI-based charter without having a pre-approval from these two offices. It sells well when we go and present it to our board, to CFO for funding. Hey, we have checked with privacy. They have looked at it from all aspects. We got a thumbs up. The compliance has validated our hypothesis. They are good with the idea. And as both my colleagues said, it has to be incremental wins. Look at the spectrum from Gartner, from Capgemini research report on adoption of AI within cybersecurity. They have tons of use cases or quadrants where quick wins can be done with minimal effect and resources needed. Once you start showing that return on investment on these initiatives, you get the needed support, you get the funding, and building those alliances across the board. I think some of our initiative, quite honestly speaking, when we put out there, we were not sure of the use cases. When we presented to our business council, they said, hey, by the way, can we use this for this also? Because this will help my service line. And that added a new value to what we were trying to do.
I think if I could just add one more comment, is like the quick wins are really testing the product as it progresses and delivering that to the customer. I think we're always very shy to deliver products that are half-baked, but having half-baked and having a delivery to the concept that we can accomplish, the customer will buy in more and more. So we can steadily grow by actually providing partial deliveries to the customer so that they grow with us and they understand the pain and agony of delivering a full-blown secure AI product.
Thank you. Okay, so I know we're down to our last 5 minutes, and we have a couple more questions. So this is going to be kind of speed round almost, guys. Okay. All right. Regulators are more interested in cybersecurity now. The SEC says that every publicly traded company has to update stakeholders on cybersecurity stuff when they do the board meetings. What do you say about AI, and how does this impact your strategy, Matt?
So Huawei has a very big target on APAC. And when I'm talking to both internal stakeholders and to regulators, the way that I go about it is just with complete transparency. So I work with governments of various governments in Europe that are trying to develop codes of practice for application stores and for cellular stuff. And I work a lot with them on helping to define those frameworks. And at that kind of level, they're also talking to my peers, to Google, to Apple, and so on. And so I always find that the best thing to do is just to be completely straight about what we're doing, and to try and explain to them the journey that we're going on, how far we've got down that journey, and what we're doing with AI. And the same goes for internal. So when I'm in the board or C-suite meetings, then I also explain the similar kind of things. Just let people know, because I think it's more of a risk to us if we're not completely transparent, and things go wrong, which they do with some tools.
Absolutely.
Well, all these regulations are definitely putting more scrutiny on AI strategy. You are being asked a lot more questions, which you would have been done previously. So get your facts ready, make sure you are transparent, and don't go in alone. As I said, build alliances. They will ask you a question. Have you checked with privacy? Is compliance okay with this? What's legal opinion? So make sure when you're putting a plan or a strategy, it has been vetted by that council.
Okay, we're going to wrap up with Mahasa. Last question. Okay, how do you demonstrate ROI for AI in cybersecurity, and how do you get stakeholder buy-in from everyone necessary?
So it's very important for us to prove the concept in a real, tangible way to our customers. Otherwise, they're not going to buy. Those days of delivering, wait 1 year, I'll give you something, is over. Right? But what we have to understand is what the product can do in place of the type of losses that we have in cybersecurity. Knowledge. All of us should be cybersecurity experts. That knowledge transfer that comes from the AI agent to every customer that's out there is immeasurable. And it can be done on a daily basis. We can teach cyber to our customers that are not interfacing with cyber issues. We can handle automation and do the processing of any kind of issues that come on right off the bat. We can do a lot of digestion of information that's out there that gives us the cyber threat. So those ROIs have to be built into the product as we deliver the product to the customer.
Thank you.
I will add 3 KPIs we do with AI. Mean time to detection. If you are reducing that, you can show it tangibly, you got a winner. Mean time to respond. Before deploying an AI, this was my response to responding to an event. This is what I am doing. And headcount reduction. If you can bring down the headcount, you got a winner there.
So while we're out of time, we're all going to be here at the conference. If you have any questions or want to talk about the topic further, please don't reach out to us. Thank you.